to the podcast. We've got Mr. Cody here. How you doing today, sir?
Very good. How are you? Thank you for having me on.
Dude, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. We are excited to have you. We have a West Coast guy hanging out with us. Because of the time that we record, we don't end up with a lot of West Coasters just because you guys are making like a solid sacrifice to join us. So thank you for representing West Coast out here for sure.
Yeah.
Cody, we want to get to know you and your game. We got a couple questions that we ask to get people, connected. And one of them is going to be very telling of how this episode's going to go. And I kind of teased it in the intro of like, some of you listening are going to be able to relate to Cody in a deep, deep way. So we'll start off. How long have you been playing disc golf?
Almost 3 years. Next month would be 3 years. So
okay,
when COVID hit.
You're COVID golfer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like having to remember now. It's been 3 years since the COVID outbreak and whatnot. So like, wow, kind of crazy that you guys are that far along. So I love it. Okay, so been playing that long. Now we step up to a hole, and I'm like, hey, Cody, what's your golf distance, both forehand and backhand? When you're looking at a hole, you're like, it's blank far out. I feel like I can reach it comfortably and accurately.
So forehand would be about 375. I feel like I can get there. And backhand is 0. There's no backhand off the tee.
I love it. I love it. So we have a forehand exclusive player. So get excited for that. The only time I guess you're throwing backhands is putts.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was going to be even more shocked if you were a forehand putter as well. Just just zipping them in.
Sometimes scoobers, sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's going to make sense based on what you got for a putter. So, okay. Awesome. Now we line you up. That's off the tee. We line you up on the putting green. We give you 10 putters from 15 feet, 10 putters from 25 feet, and then 10 putters from 40 feet. How many are you making at each station?
So from 15, I would say 7 is a good number for me.
Okay.
25, I would say about 4. And 40 feet would be 1 if I'm lucky.
Okay. I love it. Awesome. And then the final question is, what would you say is the biggest strength of your game?
I would say the strength is, I think it's because I don't have a backhand. I have pretty good angle control with my forehand. Like I can throw pretty much every angle. And specifically because my course is a little shorter with like my mid-range and putters.
Okay. Awesome. And that's something that I'm going to be, I'm even going to kind of ask, like I'm going to have some questions along the way for the nice part is with only 2 of us here today, I'm going to ask extra questions for the hope of fulfilling the co-duty of my guy, Brad. So trying to as we were prepping, I was like, all right, what would Brad ask here? So got to make sure my man is represented. So we are going to start with your putters because you're playing those shorter courses. Something that I actually really like about your bag right off the bat is that like there is a ton of mold minimalization that has already occurred in your bag. So kind of walk me through before we even dive into specifics. Is that intentional? Because like you're trying to make sure that since you're already having to work a disc on a different angle, like why so few molds?
I think it's because I have a ultimate background. So I was kind of used to only using one disc. So once I found kind of something in that slot that I liked, I was like, okay, I'll just get a backup. And then through wear and tear, it just became, I have the one that I used a lot, so it's beat up, and then I have the backup, which has got a little more stability.
Okay, awesome. What position did you play in Ultimate?
I was mainly, I played like the cutter, but since everyone forces flick, my flick just got really good. So
yeah, that's fair. Now, do you still play Ultimate while also doing this, or are the Ultimate days like behind?
I think the COVID days kind of stopped it. Okay. Because I was signed up for a league that got stopped, and then I saw disc golf, and I basically took that money. I got that refund from the league and bought disc golf disc.
Okay, awesome. I know for me personally, I was a handler in Ultimate, And so I remember a conscious day where I was like, all right, I'm officially moving on from Ultimate and I'm adding a forehand to my game in disc golf, because I would like play disc golf casually with friends while we were still playing like club level Ultimate. And like anytime I'd played like 2 or 3 rounds that week, I'd get to practice and my forehand was like, my flick was so bad. And I was like, what am I doing? And so it's definitely a different throw, but the competency of throwing a disc, I think it's super helpful. Especially that angle manipulation. I think you're spot on. So we start off with a disc that has a cult following. My feelings have been expressed on the internet, but you've got, for putting putters, we'll go there. We'll go to putting putters first, get those kind of out of the way. What do you putt with?
I have 2 Brody swirl roaches and then 2 of the Brody soft scuba roaches.
Okay. Awesome. So, and you have 4 in the bag because practicing, warm-ups, stuff like that?
Yeah, it's more like warming up. I need more than just 2, I feel like, because that's my weakest part. So.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Now, do those ever get thrown off the tee, or is it like special circumstances only?
No, I never throw those off the tee.
Okay. Now, like for approaches or something, if there's like a weird shot, or still pretty much just making the other ones work too?
Approaches, it would have to just be like scubers, I guess.
Okay. Cool. Just trying to get a grasp of the overall vibe. So there's a pretty big jump in terms of like, you go from, you've got your roaches are there, but they kind of don't exist on the chart to a degree.
Yes.
So you're throwing a cult classic 1-speed in your bag. Tell us about the Berg.
So I think a lot of people, they get that, oh, I like it because you could approach and can't overthrow things. But I use it as, if you compare to a backhand player who has an overstable putter, such as like an Envy or something, and they get that flat shot and it goes for a little bit and just has that soft, gentle fade. That's how I use my Berg off the tee, up to like 250. Okay. And then I can also manipulate. I use 2 angles, so I throw it flat for that, and then I throw it and Hyzer, so if I have a shorter backhand finishing hole, it'll act as my, I guess, backhand.
Yeah. So I see that you got 2 Bergs in there. Is there one that kind of functions more like your quote backhand disc and one that's more of that flat shot, or do you kind of throw them on both?
I think the orange one, it's a K1. I think it's just slightly gotten beaten up, and then the glow's a little more stable. So if I were to want to hold that line more, it'd probably be the orange one. But if it's a windier day, I'll throw the glow one, and it kind of gives me the same thing.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. And I know something that like the Berg prides itself on is that lack of glide, for sure. It's probably the most one glide that I've ever seen. So for you, do you feel like, as when you're trying to throw that like backhand finishing shot, I know a lot of times with the forehand turnover, you kind of need space and like air to make that shot happen. So how does that work with the Berg?
Yeah, you definitely, when you're giving it that Hyzer, if there's no height involved, you're probably going to turn it and burn it right into the ground, or it'll kind of cut roll. So yeah, out in California where I'm at, there's not many, like, I guess, very like low ceiling gaps that are wooded and need that. You usually have some space. If you like make the initial gap, you'll have space.
Okay. So still with the Berg, kind of got to juice it and get it high.
Yeah,
because
I would say
definitely needs the room.
Yeah. Especially, it's almost like a backhand turnover shot, like when you're cranking it on Annie. If they don't get it high, it's that same concept. You have to give it height, or it's just not going to work.
Okay. Awesome. So we move from the Berg up to the zone, and you've got 2 zones and a zone OS, new addition to the bag. So tell me about your zones.
So the 2 zones, the Crystal Flex one, I kind of like it more for upshots, because sometimes it gets like 100 degrees out here, and it becomes very like like floppy or gummy in your hands off the tee. So I use the Z Glow more for off the tee, and then I use the Z or the Crystal Flex for like up shots. Okay. So, and those I generally throw on like pretty much any line you could think of, like Hyzer, flat, and Hyzer. I even like almost can throw that same Berg shot, but I'm giving it like 1 o'clock and Hyzer and just letting it almost pan out like that. So like, I don't know how you would call it. It just goes from like super Anheuser to almost landing flat.
Okay. Wow. And that's with the Z Glow?
That's, yeah, I could do them with both zones. Not the Zone OS though. That thing will fight out. That's not gonna happen.
Yeah. So tell me about the Zone OS. What's it open for you in your game?
For my local course, it's mainly island shots because I think Hyzer, in my opinion, is my worst release because they go into the ultimate Frisbee bad habits of nose up. So what this allows me to do is basically I could release it flat or a little Annie around a tree and still get a Hyzer flight out of it. So that's what I've noticed that it's very useful for.
Okay. Awesome. So yeah, and I think that especially with a power forehand, have you messed around with the Zone OS at slower speeds, like throwing it at slower speeds yet?
Yeah, I've done it with like up shots and stuff because it gets like also in winds, like where I live in Lancaster, it's like 30 mile per hour wind sometimes. And like, so just even a touch on the Zone OS, like I know it's not like budging anywhere.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think that the one thing when, because when I was at Music City, the Zone OS was like, it was just, I think first runs were like coming out. And so there was several Discraft pros who were like, had their test flights and everything like that. And the one thing they were talking about, was the like, it's almost a bit of a different disc when you throw it slow versus like, oh, I'm trying to jam on this thing.
Yeah, it does have like, it picks up a little bit when you throw it harder. Like as far as like getting to that knifing, almost like 6 o'clock Hyzer.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So it sounds like between your zones and your Bergs, that's like probably, man, it sounds like 60-70% of your shots you're throwing with those.
Yeah,
with those
I think of it as like anything up to 275. I mean, the Berg is pushing it that far. It's like 250. But basically, I kind of consider that as my short game, like 275 off the tee and up to like, or I guess down to up shots to like 60 feet or so.
Okay. Awesome. And then, 60 feet and then we're kind of like a step putt or a jump putt or something like that. Yeah. Totally fair. I was interesting. I was talking with some people in my Patreon and they asked like, so how far out do you feel like you're actually running putts? And it's always curious. Like, so I'll ask you that, like how far, you said at 40, you're feeling like you're lucky, but like when does that putting motion change for you from I'm putting to, or I'm doing some form of a putt to like, okay, I'm throwing an upshot?
I think like a good, like probably 80 feet. I'm like, no, it's not in my putting. I'm just hoping at this point. So better just to put it under the basket and tap it in.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. I think that's a great range to think from. So, okay. So that's 275 and shorter. So what happens? We step past that a little bit. There is one disc that stands in the gap on the chart from, and it sounds like I'm going to be very curious. I've got a lot of questions about this disc specifically. So, you got a Matrix living in that spot. It is not the most popular MVP mid for sure.
Yeah.
So why the Matrix?
Well, I think because I took one, I don't know what in the bag it was, but I remember you talking about, it might've been the Hunter gyro. You talked about a reactor and like get it in glow and it will be like a lot more stable. And when I was throwing it, it basically flew as like backhand players through Mako threes. Like whatever angle I put it on, there's no coming back. Like, and that's good and bad. If you're on, it's good. If you're not on, which I'm an AM, so I'm not on all the time. The Matrix has that little, I guess, little bit of stability where if I threw it on a little too much Anheuser, it'd still have that little fight to come out. Or like it kind of fixes a little better than the reactor does.
Okay. And in that proton plastic, so it's got some like extra beef to it with the proton.
I would almost think of like, I don't know if they could see my chart, but the way the Berg, the Matrix, and the Undertow, I kind of have that same theory of like I throw these only flat and on Anheuser. And then my more overstable stuff, I have all the angles I like to do.
Okay. Yeah. So, and we'll end up talking when we get to sort of the suggestion piece. We'll end up talking more about the struggle of that Hyzer release because I think there's room that we can help with that, which it sounds like would not only unlock another shot, but like it could help even utilize a lot of other discs that are already in your bag. So I'm going to be very curious on that. So when you throw your Matrix, is your Matrix like, did it come out of necessity for like, there are just a certain amount of holes that like, as a forehand only player, I have to be able to throw this quote backhand shot? Like,
I feel like generally over here, since the courses are pretty open, you generally have both lines to the basket, and that's kind of why I only have one of them, is because I might throw it like once or twice around, because there's one that is just like very backhand, like that's the clear gap. And so that's why I did feel like I needed that, because like trying to force over these overstable discs all the time is like, if you don't have the ceiling, you can't do it, where the Matrix, I don't need as high of a ceiling.
Okay. Yeah. And to go to what you're saying of like California golf, for those of you not familiar, I've not played California golf, but like watched a lot of coverage and things like that. It is when we're looking at a fairway and the tee sign is going to say 325 to the basket. You're saying like there are some more open opportunities. Usually, does that mean like, hey, I could go forehand, like fairway shaped here? There's like one big tree that you got to get around this way. But if you maybe add 50 feet to distance, you could go up and around it on the left side of the tree or something. Like, is that what you're talking about? Kind of the forehands are open as well?
Yeah, I feel like it's like off the tee, they usually give you one initial gap to hit, whether that be the right side of it, the left side of it, and you can generally make, depending your play style, backhand or forehand work.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So I think that if you're listening to this and you are not in California or West Coast golf, maybe you're playing woods golf, I think that's where you may see a couple of the limitations of the forehand only working out there. I'd be curious in the comments below for any of our listeners who have migrated or done anything like that from open to woods or whatever, or woods to open. What changes have you seen in your game? Very curious there. So jumping from the Matrix, like I said, speed chasm. We go from the Matrix, which is a 5-speed, all the way up to Raptors. And you've got 3 Raptors in the bag and then a cap wrap. So talk to me about the Raptors, and then we'll come back to the cap wrap.
So I kind of section them 2 by 2. So the Z Raptor and I think it's called like Midnight Crystal. Those 2 are together, and then the Z one is more beat in. So it just basically on a flat line will go straighter, longer before it wants to fade. And then the Midnight Z is your typical Raptor. Like if you bought a Raptor right now, that's what you would see. And then the other Raptor is like a Crystal Yuli one that basically I think is a cap wrap. So then I was like, well, I don't think I'll ever find another Raptor like this. So I'll just buy a Captain's Raptor and see if it's comparable. And basically the Captain's Raptor is like just a little more stable. Okay.
So a theory that we either talked about last episode or we talked about, I know we've talked about in the last few episodes, is this idea of like people get comfortable with this shot or this section, and then we evolve that section. Someone
Yes.
likened it to Pokemon evolutions for me, and my inner child's heart was like, yes.
Yeah.
So would you say that how you view your raptors is very similar to how you view your zones, just a little faster?
Yeah, kind of the same concept you said, but I consider it like a tent pole. So just slowly going up in stability. And then so the only thing I would want to say about these raptors is I would view the regular raptors in the zones, even the captain's raptors like that, but I kind of have, like you're saying, there's a huge gap from like a 4-speed to a 9-speed.
Yeah.
So I generally think 275 and higher, I'm going like regular raptor. But if I feel like those Z raptors are going to blow past the target, I kind of use those more stable ones, throw it on the same shot, and since it has so much fade, it kind of fits almost like where a 7 or an 8 speed would, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So using the extra stability to kind of not limit test, but like hold the limit of the disc, so you don't really feel like you have to like soft the shot or like modify how you're throwing the disc.
Yeah.
Truly letting the disc work to fight out for you automatically.
Yeah, I was almost going to change the numbers on the chart, but then I don't know if people are going to be like, why is it a 7-speed captain's raptor? But that's kind of how I view where they go in my, like where I would throw it at, basically.
That's fascinating. Okay. Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. So, okay. Yeah. And I think that's good. My question mark there would be, so ground action. When I think of California golf, I think of a lot of, like I said, like we've been talking about, flat area, not necessarily a ton of elevation, depending on the course. I'm sure there are like some big elevation change courses. Obviously, I'm so dumb. Top of the world's out there, but like, so how does the ground action work out, especially if you're leaning into a more overstable disc for your shorter shot? Are you getting a lot of ground action, or how's that play?
There's one of two ways that I think of this. Like you have to either play it because it's a lot of hard packed dirt or hard packed like sand, I guess. So you're going to get a lot of skips, or you kind of do, I guess what I would call a mini flex. Most people think of a flex as like this huge S shot, but you kind of throw it on a little ante at first. So then when it pans out and it's coming to Hyzer, it's not high, like at a severe angle as like if you throw it on a Hyzer or a flat line.
Okay. So similar to what you were talking about with your zones of like the 1 o'clock to the flat.
Yeah. Either that or it's just not high. Like it's like a flex line, but like a tighter flex line. So when it comes to Hyzer, you're kind of not getting like this super skip, like our flare skip.
Fascinating. Okay. Yeah. I think that makes a ton of sense. So if we've got the zones here and then the matrix is chilling on the left side, we've got the Raptors, and then you have the Undertow, which is a disc that Tyler Brickley's going to be so mad at me for this. I was like, who makes the Undertow? Like I'm not familiar with that disc. So you let me know. It's DGA, which kind of fits now that like once you told me that's DGA, I was like, oh, so it's a Discraft made bag with some Bergs. And that's fair. So the Undertow, talk to me about it. What's it do for you?
So when I first learned, I just took a buzz to a course and I'd learned like every angle on that buzz. And so I basically did the Marshall Street, like what is the faster buzz? And so that's how I came out with the Undertow. And I just recently put it back in because I haven't thrown it since like the beginning of my time, and I think 10 speed was way too fast when I was trying to throw it. Now that I throw it and it basically feels like that, it feels like I can manipulate all the angles on it, and it has decent stability, no turning and burning. So
okay. Now, similar to, so you only have one matrix in the bag, you only have one Undertow. So if you're throwing the matrix 1 to 2 times around, Undertow similar, or is it getting more action just because of length?
I think it's only going to get thrown if there's like, say, 350 plus, and it's like for sure backhand finishing. Even then, I might even, if I have enough space, take the Raptor and do that same line I was talking about, because I've gotten that pretty far.
Okay. Fascinating. So it would serve more of a role like some of us who have like that comfort, the utility disc or that super understable option that like, for me, it would be like a Sail in my bag by DGA that like, it's super flippy. So I'm not going to use it a ton, but like I'm going to step up to a shot and I'm just going to know I got it. Like that is that disc. That's the Undertow for you is what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's certain holes where like off the tee, it's like it has like a backhand angle and then it opens up, and I'll do that. I'll use the Undertow for that. I'll just get on that initial like Hyzer, and not too much Hyzer, but just enough to get through that gap. And just let it like go all the way until it fades out.
Okay. Awesome. Well, let's round out the conversation with distance drivers, because this is also where we're going to be recommending a disc. And I'm going to be very curious if this is, So anyways, top of the bag, you got 2 Nukes up there. So when are the Nukes coming out?
Basically anything that's like probably 365 plus, like basically if I feel like a Raptors, it's just too hard to get it there. And I just do, it's weird because like this is probably where because I said all my angle control and everything, but this is where I just love the flat to finish. Like I just get them flat to finish about like pretty much consistently like 380. I mean, if I get a good rip, I've hit 400, but that's like I have to hit like perfectly basically. So
yeah. Okay. Awesome. So is there any difference between the two, or is it just kind of like got them both, they're chilling?
Well, the green Big Z was also kind of one I bought too early that came back. And then the blue Big Z is like, I just saw Gossage dominate with that thing in Worlds, and I was like, and then they came out with them. I was like, oh, I gotta get one.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
But yeah, as far as stability, I would say the blue Z one has a little bit, but it's not too noticeable.
Okay, no, that's fair. And I'm always curious, and I can see the point of having both, especially throwing forehands. I feel like you're going to put a little more torque naturally on a forehand, which is going to cause them to beat in faster, and these faster discs thrown on bigger distances and everything, when they collide with something, including the ground, it's just going to beat in. So having 2 that you're familiar with as you build can be super helpful. Fun fact about Aaron, when I was hanging out with him at Music City, we were talking, it was me, him, Holland Hanley, and Holland's boyfriend chatting. And we were talking about torque and like what you put. And Aaron was perplexed that more people can put more torque on a forehand than a backhand.
Oh, really?
And we were like, no, like, especially for amateurs, dude, like you can, like, there's a single contact of point, like release, all that. And he was like, yeah, I'm fairly confident that I have way more torque on my backhand than I do on my forehand. And I was like, when you think about it, and then you watch that man throw, as much torque as you see him put on his forehand, watch his back. It's crazy.
He throws far. It's crazy to watch.
He smashes that. Like it comes out so fast. So, fascinating. Well, Cody, one of the questions that I asked you before we recorded was, what's a shot in your bag, or what area of your bag do you feel least confident in? And you talked to me about low ceiling, backhand looking holes. So talk me through like why is that tough for you?
I think it's basically because, and then Hyzer's like initial flight kind of wants to get down, and so that means you almost have to give it height. And if you don't have the height to give it, or you're flirting with like that tree branch, makes it a little scarier off the tee. And then, or you could throw a cut roller. It's very like I guess, angle sensitive and touchy at that point. So
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes so much sense to me. So the disc that I wanted to have Brad try out, and what we may have been doing is sending it out to you because I'm very curious. You've talked about a Hyzer release is your hardest angle, and that comes from Ultimate and like throwing it nose up. And I think that looking at the discs you have in your bag, it can be really tough, really probably to throw most of these, because if you go to the Matrix or you go to the Undertow, which are the more understable options you have in there, people can try to convince me the Berg's understable all day, and I will just laugh and say, no way, brother.
It's not.
Like, no way. So I look at all those options, and I'm like, okay, it can make sense to me, because even if you throw those on Hyzer, like the Undertow, you probably have to rip it on some Hyzer in order for it to burn over. Like, give it enough height, it's going to have a chance pretty much any time. Throw it flat, it probably if you throw your Undertow flat, is it going to turn and then fight back?
If it turns, it's very slightly. It's like it's generally pretty good. Like, just going straight for like a long time, and the fade is like not as dumpy as a Raptor. So it's almost like, closest thing I would say is like I've thrown an Onyx, but it has a little more fade on how it flies.
Okay. Yeah. So what the shot that made me think of this is, we've got in town, we have 2 holes that are tunnel shots, like 17 and 18 proper tunnel shots. Now in the southeast, woods golf, I play it all the time. I love woods golf. Maybe it's because I don't throw like crazy far, so wide open fields just intimidate me, and I'm like, oh look, yeah, just a little pebble toss out there, that's fun. But when it comes to woods golf, what I started for a long time when I played specifically hole 18 at this course, it is a tunnel that's probably 15, 20 feet wide at its most, and it carries for about 250 feet, and then it opens up off to the left. And so for a long time, and when I coach people, I will tell them, like, take a putter, throw it straight down the gap, like just a nice straight putter shot, throw it 200 feet, 250 if you can get there, and then that opens you up to the rest of the gap. You don't have to get all the way out there, because once you have like 50 feet left of a gap, it feels way easier to throw whatever you want to get it out of there. But then I had this Wraith that I put in my bag that is like a long time love, super flippy. At this point, it turned into like my absolute max distance shot. I got it up to 450 once on a forehand, and literally just watch this thing stand all the way up, turn, and then fight back. Like, it's nasty what it can do. But I'm with you, coming from an Ultimate background, I struggle sometimes when I go super Hyzer. I did this yesterday. I threw a Firebird, and it just went straight up in the sky, and I was like, well, that stinks. But what I love about super understable stuff in the distance driver category is that high speed of the shot, if you soft it, can counteract and still add some stability to it. But it can also be a really good, unlike, let's say, the uplink, which we've had and talked about on the podcast a lot. The uplink is a lower speed disc, so it's very easy to burn it over. Like, you kind of have to like almost 30% power flick it to get it to stand up and do the shot. So I'd be very curious, have you ever thrown a Nuke SS before?
No, I haven't. I've only thrown the Nukes, and that's it.
So I like, there's no way that I spend a week with Brody and Ezra and don't end up like with some interest in the Nuke. So I actually have a Nuke SS in my bag right now. And what I'm finding is I have a Nuke SS and I have a Sail. Now the Sail, like I said, crazy flip. Like, I don't think you want something that flippy, because I think that's going to take us to uplink world and you're going to like see it. But on this hole 18's fairway, what I started doing is I started just taking this Wraith, and I could almost like drag it on the ground. It felt like, I'm sure I wasn't actually on the ground, but throwing this forehand on a Hyzer, and what it would do is it would, like, on a low ceiling shot, stand all the way up and then even start getting left. And that was a super beat in Wraith. And I think a Nuke SS might be able to do that for you right off the bat.
Okay. Yeah.
So still give you that discraft feel. It feels very similar to a Nuke. And so I would love to try to put something like that in your hands to see, okay, let me just experiment with this shot. It's not a shot you're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
What does that kind of make you think?
Yeah, I never even thought of like doing that just because I've gotten such bad habits from Ultimate. But I mean, I could see where it's like a familiar feel, and I do like that concept of like you're kind of getting added stability with speed instead of like just number alone of fade. That's nice.
Yeah, because then you don't have to hit this. You could hit this with the faster you get, you could hit it with the speed you're throwing a zone at like a 225 foot shot and see what happens with it. And then eventually, as you get more trustworthy with it, move it up to I'm throwing my Raptors on a 300 foot shot instead of a 360 shot. So that's what kind of power it needs, because the nice thing is as well, let's say you're pinched off or you're like bad footing, you can throw the Nuke SS and let it stand up with a lot less power and a lot less torque than you would have to on like a super force flex line with something else. So if that's something you're interested in, I would love to get a Nuke SS or even something equivalent in the mail for you to try out if you'd be interested.
Oh yeah, I'd be interested in trying that.
Awesome. And would you be willing to come back on the show and let us know how it goes?
Of course, yeah. I'll let you know.
Awesome. Well, dude, Cody, this was very, very interesting. I'm going to be very curious to hear Brad's thoughts afterwards as he listens through this. But just, I think there's a lot of folks listening that are forehand dominant, and we focus a lot on the backhand players. So my forehand folks, let us know some love in the comments if you enjoyed this episode. Cody, I want to say thanks for coming on, man. And we look forward to having you on a future episode.
All right. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.
Man, guys, I thoroughly enjoyed that. I think it is fascinating how one person can build a bag with discs that we are all using in like a certain or specific way and attack it entirely different. It's such a cool part of disc golf and how disc golf works is that these tools, we can use them on so many different angles. So I love seeing the forehand only player. I stand by, if you are playing in woods golf, I do think that it has its limitations, but it's kind of a fun challenge. If you've never played a forehand only round before, especially if you don't have a great forehand, I've got a student that I'm coaching right now who is trying to develop a forehand. He's been super frustrated that he doesn't have the forehand that all of his friends have. And so I have him right now suffering through some forehand only rounds, and he's recording them and sending them to me for me to look at, and we're working through it. So if you don't have that strength, work on it. And if you're a forehand only player, conversely, and you want to learn a backhand, play some backhand only rounds, see how it goes. So very thankful for Cody coming on. Yeah, man, super, super clutch. And now here's a fun surprise. You guys wouldn't expect this based on how it started, but we got to find out what's new in the warehouse. So let's bring him in. Mr. All Business Brad asking, what's new in the warehouse?
What's up? This is Brad. Post episode, Robbie did this one himself, so I hope you all enjoyed that. I was out on a little PTO. My son had a field trip, so I went to the zoo. That was a lot of fun, but hey, wanted to keep up my perfect attendance streak here. I think 53 episodes strong. So I want to come with you, tell you what's new in the warehouse. Again, thank you for Flippy for sponsoring the In the Bag podcast. Make sure you check out our In the Bag podcast merch, along with all this cool stuff that is coming out Friday, which I'm recording this Friday. So today at 5 p.m. Eastern time. I think the biggest news we have here is that the foundation stamped MVP is launching. So we have fission hexes with these crazy swirly rims. And we have glitches as well. We're also releasing some stuff for our friends over at Swanky Disc Golf. They were releasing some custom MVP as well. You can check that out at 5 p.m. They're releasing fission hexes, glitches, and they have Prism Plasma Envies, and they are sick and they fly great, allegedly. Some other cool stuff we have coming out. Make sure you're looking at our minis. We restocked all of our minis, a lot of cool stamps and different types of colors, so make sure you check those out. We have the Alpha from Mint Discs released. We also have a restock on some of our trilogy things that dropped this week as well. I know there's a Tristan Tanner Honor. There is a Silverlot Orbit Rive. We have the Orbit Explorers. There's a lot of great stuff to check out there. On the Discmania front, we have FD1s, MD1s they released last week, but make sure you check out those. Great disc, by the way, and some cool Evolution stamped paradigms. And honestly, I ordered some Iron Samurais and they came in with a printed Eagle McMahon signature on them. So not sure what those are about, but hey, they're there. Make sure you check them out as well. Other big news from Discraft, they sent us a lot of cool stuff that typically you can only get from like their player factory stores, so like Brody's Discraft store or Paul's Discraft store, but they let us have some of that in our warehouse. So make sure you check those out. There's stuff like Get Spooky Buzzes and Scuba Roaches, which I was particularly excited about. And then we have some CT Wasps, some Paul Limited Stamp Zeuses and Maltas, and some, I believe, Lil Z Lunas. There's a few other molds, but make sure you check them out. You can check all this out on foundationdisc.com in the recently restocked section. If you're signed up for our email list, you're going to get an email about all this cool stuff. Also, we film a segment called What's New in the Warehouse every week. So if you're on our email list there, you'll get that video every week where Trevor, Hunter, Connor, Silas, whoever's in the warehouse walks through the new molds this week. You can get a little visual, a little sneak peek of what's dropping today at 5 p.m. Eastern time. So as always, we appreciate you all so much. Thanks for watching these episodes, and thanks for being supporters of In the Bag podcast. We couldn't do it without you, and we couldn't do it without you supporting Foundation and foundationdisc.com. So look forward to next episode, back to a normal one. Robbie and I both will be there. And until then, if it's good, keep in the bag. We'll see you all next week.